that's one way to do it. I'm not sure if our goal is awesome husbands and happily ever after, that's great. And I don't think any of you guys are doing that anyway, so we can maybe move away from that. But I think there's always the question of, so he comes along. We meet a great guy who might be Mr. Him, might be the right one. How much are we allowed, not even how much are we allowed to do? I think that is the question we tend to ask. I want to replace that with, how do we make strategic choices and what will get us from where we are to where we want to be? Now, I'm going to preface this whole conversation with a disclaimer, and I need you to believe me. Nod your head that you'll believe what I'm saying. You're not nodding. Thank you. Okay. No matter what you've done, with whatever guy you've done it with, this is not meant to in any way make you feel like the promises we're talking about from God do not apply to you. Okay? This is the way faith in Jesus works. This is the total bonus plan of faith in Jesus. Is at any point we can say like, wow, that was maybe not the best decision. Jesus, I'm sorry I did that. And he'll say, well, I'm kind of sorry too. Nice to have this chat. Can I take that for you? Let's start over. And you get do-overs. It's like mulligans in golf. If you hit a bad shot, you can say, I'm just going to do that one over. And I make light of it, but actually for me that was a pretty powerful thing. I had a history when I started following Jesus. I dated a lot of guys. I don't think I was promiscuous, but I guess that depends on what standard you're judging by. And so it was really good news when I heard people talking about this idea that I might not want to put all my cards on the table sexually early on in a relationship, that just because I had in the past didn't mean that had to define what I did going forward. And so, are you all still believing me? Mm-hmm. Okay. What are your thoughts about, and again, I think it varies. The Bible suggests strongly, definitively, that sex is for after marriage, that somehow, we've talked about this, that like there's a glue aspect to it that can stick you to guys before you're ready in ways that make it hard to untangle yourself or even think clearly, but that within marriage it actually bonds a husband and wife together in ways that help them withstand all the pressures in life that try to pull them apart. And they're quite significant. And so I think the glue is good here, not so good before you get married. But beyond that, there's not much in the Bible saying which of the other bases are an option. Different translations talk about how you want to avoid fornication, and I've seen fornication defined a whole array of different ways. Sexual immorality is another. Well, there are folks who would argue that anything done between two consenting, loving adults is not immoral. And so I think there's tons of wiggle room here. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what's a good idea, what's a bad idea, what your questions are, what you hope is on the table, what you hope is allowed. Yeah.
Well, I have one vague thought, which is that, I mean, I grew up in kind of like the South and conservative Christian culture, and I think one of my biggest beefs now, having, you know, grown into my own a little bit with my own ideas, is that that church seemed to talk about like sex being, well, you know, save sex until marriage, but not actually having a conversation about what it means to be physically intimate with someone. So I think, you know, when I think about all those different bases and the things between bases, it feels like a lot of those things may feel very physically intimate, and it seems like that seems like what's most important. Like trying to define when is the point where you become physically intimate with someone is more important maybe than, you know, trying to create a spectrum of what's okay and drawing a line somewhere. For me, it always seemed like, you know, becoming physically intimate with someone was where I became connected with them or felt connected to someone. So I would argue that maybe it's more interesting to think about kind of like what is the importance of like physical intimacy and when do you want to have that, and what things can you do that don't really connect you to someone in terms of intimacy rather than specifically sex.
Yeah. Others?
I think because of I was just talking to one of my girlfriends about this the other day, and she made a really great point in that the way our bodies are designed, and especially if you're with a man who you're attracted to, I think before our minds or our hearts even go there, our bodies want to go there. Like, our bodies want to join because they were made to do that. So I think if when you're fooling around with a guy, and certainly if you get to the point where even if you're like, I'm not going to have sex, but you're both naked, it's really hard to say that you're not going to go there. And I think it's a really slippery slope. I think it can happen really quickly. And so I think what's really helpful is, I don't know if I heard you say this or if I heard Dave say this, but the pre-made decision. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it's really helpful to decide, okay, I'm not going to do that. Like if you're on a diet, you know, and you want to not eat sweets, you kind of have to make a decision about that. You can't just say, well, I'll make a decision when the cake starts going around. You know, like if it looks good, I'll try some, maybe, you know. That's not really going to help. Like you sort of have to say, I'm not going to do this, you know. And then when you get to a place where you actually have to make a decision and there's something in front of you, then you have that to go back to. Because otherwise, you can manipulate, like as you were saying, you can manipulate yourself in the moment. You know, if you don't have something to say, like, I'm not going to go there. So, I think as far as, like, I mean, and I don't know, like, how far you go is different, you know, for different people. Like, maybe, I don't know if that means I'm not going to do anything beyond kiss or whatever. I think it's different for everyone. But I think deciding what your point is and then making a decision that I'm not going to do that, and then informing the guy of that, I'm not going to do that.
Well, and let's talk for a minute why you even want to make that kind of decision. Because I think, I don't know, I just felt like when we started this conversation, the whole energy in the room went like,
well, and the possible consequences of your decision. You know, I think that's also part of what goes into the decision.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And the fear and the decision.
Right. It feels fraught, I think, for a reason. And then, it's so funny, you talk sort of in my secular life, when we talked about sex, it was all like, and then I came to the church, and when I talked to my single girlfriends about sex, I was like, oh, that's a bummer. It just felt like this huge, okay, I'm going to give you a window into why the pre-made decision is worth it. Well, first, at a practical level, here I think is the genius of God's plan. You meet a guy, he's not just someone to buy you beer. You actually think like, whoa, this could be it. Like, and he's sort of getting better and better, and you actually do respect him, and he seems to love you, and he calls when he says he's going to, and you just think, at a fundamental level, if you are not rolling around, you have a lot of time to get to know each other, and it speeds things along. And you get to know really quickly. I know so many couples who have been married within a year of meeting, because I think if you're not having sex, you're fighting over the things that you disagree about. Not fighting necessarily, but like you have to talk everything out. There's no place to escape. I mean, how many of us have just said, oh, stop talking, you are so boring, or so the wrong political party or whatever, just kiss me, because you're hot. Maybe I'm the only one that's ever done it. But I think there's that temptation, right, to overlook it, and you sort of, especially if there's sexual chemistry, you throw yourself into that, and you just say, I'll deal with the rest later. Or you assume that because there's physical chemistry, that means there's something real here. And so you ignore the signs that, like, you're not really compatible on any other level. And so if you take that out of the equation temporarily, it both buys you some time, and I find speeds up the relationship. Because if you know you're not going to do